Good. Hey everyone, welcome to our presentation. My name is Jonathan Broche, as my friend Alton Johnson. Today we're going to be presenting on how to secure your network and best protect and prevent ransomware infections. We developed this topic because of all the recent ransomware in the news, with WannaCry hitting the news and tons of other ones nonstop. We think it's a good idea to go over best practices with you guys. This talk is not going to go over any 0 days, or we're not going to release any 0 days, so if you want that, you might want to go to another talk now. However, we will be doing a little dance at the end, so you might want to stick around for that. Maybe, yeah, sure. About us. My name is Jonathan Broche, again, this is Alton Johnson. We both come from a blue team background. I myself did network administration and did some help desk, fixing computers and all the good antivirus stuff. And I eventually moved on and did some incident response at my university, where I led the program and responded to anything like hackers broke in, and we chased the perpetrators down to the source. And
I used to work at a federal credit union for a few years in IT, just kind of managing the network, managing the firewall, kind of helping with the VMware infrastructure. Then I went to a security consulting firm in Baton Rouge. I was out there for a few years. And then me and Jonathan, we both transitioned over to Accuvant. We worked at Accuvant for about 2 years as well as principal consultants. And we came over to Direct Defense, and we've been principal consultants at Direct Defense for about 1.5 years. So that's kind of background for me.
And it is at Direct Defense where we are now performing penetration testing, all types of penetration testing. We do networking, Wi-Fi, and web application testing. We do social engineering, both pretext calling and phishing, as well as network architecture reviews. So today's agenda, we're going to go over the background on some current events on some ransomwares out there. We're going to discuss our philosophy and our approach to protecting against these ransomware attacks. And we're going to go over the best practices. We're also going to be releasing a tool and discussing any questions and answers you guys may have. So the background. So what is ransomware? Ransomware is a form of malware that infects computers and pretty much locks it up by encrypting all your files, and you can't unlock it unless you pay the ransom to the hacker or the attacker, right? Thus the name ransomware comes. Of course, we don't advise that you pay the ransom and you follow the best practices so you won't have to go through that route. The most recent one to hit the news in a pretty big fashion was WannaCry, which infected over 200,000 victims, and it infected everyone over SMBV1. Another one recent was NotPetya. I'm not sure how you pronounce that one, but that's how I'm going to pronounce it this time. And that infected TNT recently, and it cost them over $300 million to remediate. And one of the most recent ones to hit the news, which is around September 20th, was called Locky. And Locky emailed, they sent out over 20 million phishing emails on their first day in attempts to infect people. The developers of Locky are pretty much Game of Thrones fans. You can do a Control F in the whole script, and you can see lots of Robert Baratheon and Sansa Stark, and just lots of Game of Thrones Easter eggs throughout the whole script. So it's pretty cool. And there's lots of other ones. You know, if anyone follows security, I'm sure you all do in this room. You open the news every day. I'm sure you see new malware coming out for Android all the time. Or there's another one that recently came out discussing that to unlock your computer you have to play some kind of video games. So that was a pretty interesting twist. So our philosophy is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Our philosophy is if you harden your perimeter, if you protect your perimeter, and if you increase user security awareness within your environment, you're going to have a win. And you're going to reduce the chances of, not only reducing the chances of getting infected by malware or ransomware, but all types of attack vectors. All right. Can you guys believe that only 52% of organizations agree that there is a need to protect and prepare for a breach? That's pretty surprising to me. That means almost 50% of the organization are not willing to prepare or don't think it's important to prepare for a breach. It's pretty scary. I think the important thing is to have a plan in place to protect, prevent, and respond to incidents. How do we do this? We do this by implementing firewall configurations, good patch management solutions, increasing user security and awareness within an environment, implementing good backup and incident response procedures, and much more.
All right, so one of the things that we typically recommend as far as helping prevent ransomware and malware and just external attacks is firewall configurations. So when we're doing external assessments, we usually see a lot of ports excuse me, a lot of ports that are open. There's a lot of like administrative services, but just basically things that shouldn't be open on the external environment. And obviously, if it's not necessary for business operations, it shouldn't be open. So that's where strict ACLs come in place. So with Ingress and Egress filtering, so the same thing applies internally as well. So when we do internal assessments, we usually do like an ingress and egress when we do our assessment testing. And we see that, there's a lot of ports that are open. So there's like SSH outbound that's open. There's Telnet. I can get to like, my VPS and DigitalOcean and things like that. And I mean, access to these services shouldn't be possible if it's not necessary for business operations. So we typically have, companies to look into this and make sure that they're, periodically, implementing, their ACLs and checking over them to make sure that they're implemented correctly. Also too, with segmented networks. So, segmentation is obviously very important for PCI reasons and, just common sense, I guess, best practice. Obviously, if someone compromises a particular system or that's in a very segmented network, it's not going to escalate into your entire environment. So if somebody compromises something that's in a DMZ, you don't have to necessarily panic over your entire environment being compromised. Or if someone clicks on a link in an email in this environment, they don't have to worry, you don't have to worry about the entire environment being at risk, or at least the risk is a little bit lower since there's segmentation in place. So administrative services. Most of the time we perform external assessments. We see like SSH open, Telnet, and when we talk to our clients about this, they're usually not aware of, these services being open or why they're actually open. Some clients, they have administrative services open for like managing their devices remotely. But I guess our argument to that is to just have like VPN, right? Why does SSH have to be open to the entire internet if only one administrator goes home and uses it once a week? So, if you put that behind a VPN, then obviously, your exposure becomes a little bit more limited because only trusted users have access to it. Also, too, with regards to like phishing. So obviously phishing is a huge deal these days. We do a lot of phishing attacks. We see, that clients, they allow like executables, to be passed through. Sometimes you can submit like, different like batch files. Even like PowerShell scripts. If you have a mail server that's constantly looking for like attachments that are potentially malicious, then I mean, you should probably implement like a whitelist or a blacklist approach. Only allow certain things or explicitly block, certain extensions. And also too with your firewall configuration, you want to make sure that it's documented properly. When we get on the calls with our clients, a lot of them don't know why certain ports are open or why things are the way they are. They don't have any documentation. They don't know who's responsible for it. So it becomes like a big confusion internally. They're trying to figure out who opened it up and why. And, it turns out somebody opened it up for, one specific reason and just left it open. They just forgot. So if it's not documented and, there's not a process involved, then things like this could easily slip through and, increase your overall attack surface. And so, once you implement all these things, I mean, obviously your attack surface on the external environment becomes a little bit lower because you have less exposure to the guys that are out there trying to find, vulnerabilities and open ports and services, that could possibly be open for misconfigurations and things like that. Also, too, with patch management. So you want to have a patch management solution in place. Obviously there's people out there looking for 0 days every single day. There's a lot of organizations out there that don't have an effective patch management solution. So when patches come out, they don't know what to do. They don't know what systems are vulnerable. They don't know what systems have what updates. And so obviously you want to have a solution in place that can take care of this. Another thing too is to make sure that your patch management solution has support for native and third-party applications. So not only just Windows updates, but also if you install like OpenSSH or Apache, that you have a solution in place that addresses any patch-related issues that stem from these third-party applications. Obviously, you want to test your patches. You don't want to just go in and just update patches and break things, unless probably if it's like a big security thing like WannaCry, obviously like Apache struts rather. You kind of want to jump on that pretty quickly, but for the most part, obviously within your patch management solution, you want to have a process that tests your patches so it doesn't break anything and make things worse. Obviously, you want to patch frequently. If you don't have a sufficient patch management solution process, you may not have patches that have been applied. You may have systems that are outdated for like a month. And obviously that's kind of a big deal, especially this day and age. Every week you go to Reddit, there's like a new, security issue out or Apache, Apache Trust 2, then, probably next week there's going to be something else out there. But, so you want to try to patch as frequently as possible. That would be, like the best process for your organization. For some companies it's a week, some is 2 weeks. So, Similar to the firewall configurations, you want to make sure you have this process you want to have this process documented as well with policies and procedures.
All right, the fun stuff. User security awareness training. So in 2016, 97% of the phishing emails sent out contained some form of ransomware, right? That's a lot, in my opinion. 97%. I think it's important to train end users with security awareness programs. I think it's pretty logical to do this. But let's go ahead and implement that at least once a year, right? Test the training to get results and current risk levels. So you implement this training with your end users, but how do you know they're actually listening? How do you know they're actually learning? You have to test the training they're getting by performing security assessments, either hiring a third party or sending out phishing emails yourself. And set expectations with policies, procedures, and strategies. So one of the more recent social engineering engagements I did was a pre-test call. I called this bank, and when I was trying to get information out of them, I would call them and say, hey, my name is Jeff from IT, or whatever scenario it was. Before they give me information, they had to confirm my identity as an internal employee. And how they did this was setting up a word of the day, right? The word of the day was randomized and was put on their SharePoint site. I think it was a great practice. I couldn't get any information out of them without that word of the day. So what I did as an attacker, I tried to get creative. I called the next guy, and I was like, hey, my name's Jeff from IT. We heard that your computer's infected. We have documentation or reason to believe that it's infected or involved in a breach. But before I give you that information, I need the password or the word of the day, right? And that guy was pretty intelligent. He's like, nope, that's not how it works. You have to give me the word of the day. And he hung up on me, and no dice. But at least I tried, right? And I learned that's a pretty good damn way of protecting yourself from previous calls, setting up a word of the day. So again, to wrap it up, on the user security awareness side, just implement user security awareness and test it out frequently to see what your current risk levels are within the organization.
All right. So obviously, you want to make sure that you have backups in place too, right? If you get infected and your systems become locked and you can't access anything, I mean, what do? Do you pay it, or do you restore backups and kind of implement your process? So obviously, you want to back up your systems on a regular basis. You want to back up your critical servers, your data, things that would be most important to your organization in case something like a ransomware happened. You also obviously want to have something stored off-site in case something physically happens to your facility. I'm sure most of y'all backup procedures have something like that, and disaster recovery procedures. Also, incident response team. Yeah, I think it's very important to have a team like this at your organization because, I mean, if something happens, what do you do? Do you have a process in place, or do you just kind of play it by ear and, go to the user that clicked on a link? Is there a way to contain like ransomware, or, how do you all handle it? So I think having an incident response team would be a great balance to make sure that if something does happen, you have a way and a team to kind of tackle this issue at the same time. Obviously, you want to be very proactive. You don't want to just wait and see how things happen. A lot of times we do an assessment, and like a week later, the client's like, "Hey, were you testing this on Thursday?" And you're like, "Yeah, I ran vulnerability scans on Tuesday." So, while it was, it kind of makes you wonder why all of a sudden they're trying to tackle an issue that you probably caused on Tuesday. You probably haven't touched that system for the rest of the week. Obviously, you want to test these strategies as well. So if you hire a security consulting firm to come out and do, whether it be an internal security assessment, physical test, or even external wireless, I would take advantage of these opportunities and make sure that they test your incident response teams, because if a consultant comes in and he just plugs up his laptop, starts scanning, and you tell the client at the end of the week, I found this, this, that, and and the other, and you have an incident response team, why not take advantage of that? Have the consultant go through phases. Like, phase one, we'll test slowly. Throughout the week, we'll get more progressive. Kind of like that approach. I mean, if you're going to hire a security consulting team, I think it would be very beneficial to take advantage of incident response testing.
My turn. All right. So honorable mentions, things that we thought were important, but that doesn't fit our philosophy to immediately prevent ransomware, right? Unless you have a good endpoint protection. So endpoint protection, what do we have? We have endpoint protection that blacklists, whitelists, and are signature based. But we highly recommend the new next gen. Everything's next gen nowadays, but a true next gen technology with behavioral analytics and algorithms. Right? There's plenty of them out there, and if you want some names, just meet us after the conference, and we'll give you some names. some HIPs and NIPs, right? So host intrusion prevention systems and network intrusion prevention systems to slow down an attacker if the breach occurred and they're successfully in your environment. With all the tools nowadays to easily get domain administrator credentials like CredCrack, Map Exec, and now Death Star as well. It's important to be logging and preventing these kinds of behaviors. There's one thing that I see that many organizations don't do, and that is audit and log successful SMB logins. So there's no way a human could log into a system, 100 systems in 5 seconds. So we want to make sure we're logging that, right, and we're catching that behavior. DLP, it's not going to prevent an attack. However, it's going to let you know where your sensitive information is. Right? By tracking and controlling your sensitive information, you could place that information behind a segmented network. And if a breach does occur and your incident response team is performing triage or making sure that doesn't escape, you could take care of your sensitive information and make sure that doesn't get into the wrong hands. Least user access. So we want to make sure that we don't grant every user in the building administrative rights. It's going to be a field day for pen testers, but it's not a good idea. Back at the university, what we used to do is we used to randomize the local administrator password. And if you needed that, you would call the help desk team, and they'll give you access to that. Another thing is the domain administrator accounts. Don't log into every system with domain administrator account, right? Keep that to high impact or sensitive systems. That way, someone is performing credential harvesting. It is a little harder to get to those godlike accounts. And SIMs, the necessary evil, right? We all love and hate SIMs. SIMs are important, mandated by some compliance frameworks. They're a pain in the butt to tune, but at the end of the day, they help with incident response and many things. Okay, and our tool to help you out with all this.
All right, so tools. We all like tools, right? So with all this being said, we developed a tool that basically helped administrators with, tackling some of the best practices, right? So, we run external scans. We see a lot of ports that's open. We're trying to figure out why they're open. We talk to the clients after our calls. They're like, oh, we don't know why it's open. They're always having like these long discussions on the kickoff, the outbrief call, trying to figure out why it's open and who opened it and what it's doing and etc. So we basically wrote a pretty nice tool that I think a few of our clients are so far appreciating, and it's kind of it's pretty much a baby right now, but we would like to kind of grow it based off of feedback. But basically, it's a tool that runs port scans on your external environment periodically. And it detects changes based on what's open in a baseline scan and what closed, and vice versa. And if there's any changes that's been detected, it'll basically send out the administrator an email. And in that email, it has an attachment that basically tells you, hey, this port was closed, and all of a sudden this one is open. Now it's open. And obviously, if it's normal, you can just ignore it, right? And same thing with like Telnet, all of a sudden, Telnet opens up for the first time on this scan and it wasn't open last week. That would raise a concern, especially if it's not documented. So hopefully with the tool, we'll kind of help prevent some unnecessarily exposed services on the external environment. And over time, we can, accept feedback and implement changes, maybe integrate it into like the internal environment a little bit more and things like that. So, all right. So now for the demo. Oops. Forgot the mouse is the other way.
That's weird. Yeah. Just open the thumb.
Is it? Oh, cool. Alright, cool. Alright. So the tool is pretty basic. Right now I just call audit. This is just a Ruby script that I wrote. And here you can see here, I don't know how big it is. So it's basically just a very simple tool. We'll try not to make it too complicated because people probably won't use it. Something that any administrator could run as long as they have Linux. They can just, put the Ruby script on there and make sure that they have Ruby and some of the small dependencies. But basically, this is the help menu. You can specify a configuration file, which I'll show you in just a second. And you can also specify if it's a baseline scan. So if this is the first time you're running a scan, you want to make sure that, if this is how your network is today and you want it to stay this way, run a baseline scan. So that way, if anything changes, you get alerted for it and you can, investigate it down the road if you choose to. Let's see. So here's the basic configuration file. So basically what it does is it runs like a discovery scan, and obviously this is just for a demonstration. You can tweak it however you do it later on. So you run a discovery scan, you see what systems are actually active on your external environment. Once you get a list of those systems, you'll run a port scan. If you want to run specific ports, if you want to run top 1,000 ports, all 65,000 ports, etc. And that's kind of what it uses to determine the changes too. You can also specify an email. So if you have a distribution group like IT@whatever.com or .org that you want to get alerted whenever there's a change that's been detected as far as ports, you can just specify that in the configuration file. And obviously, if you have a mail server, you're going to use the mail. The tool is going to use the mail server to send out emails. And obviously, I like Nutella. So right now, this is where you put your password at. If there's any, which there probably would be some concerns about where the password is stored. Right now, it's in clear text. But later on, we can kind of approach that. But again, this is just kind of a basic tool just to kind of help administrators just get it on their system, get it loaded, and start running. All right. Let's see. All right. So this right here is just a simple base scan. Very simple. It's running Nmap discovery scans, complete the port scans, and it basically made a log of what was found open on those systems at the time of the scan. It keeps this base scan on the system unless you run a new baseline. So like if you implemented a few different devices and you want that to be the new baseline, you would obviously run a new baseline scan. All right. And so this would be an example of running the configuration file, running the scan again, trying to see what ports are open now compared to last time, doing some comparisons, and again, once it sees that if there's any changes, it's not going to just send you an email just to say, hey, look, what we found is the same as the baseline. It's going to tell you this port was closed previously and now it's open, or here's a new port that basically there's a state change in the ports that were previously identified in the baseline scan. And the attachment is actually very simple. I mean, if you're an administrator, you probably don't really care about charts. You just kind of want to see what ports are open so you can get to the point and fix it. So it's basically a table that tells you what was. So the first table here is telling you basically the status of the status of the ports at the current scan, and the second one here is telling you that it was filtered in the baseline scan, but now it's open. Again, very simple, but over time, again, I hope that we could implement some changes and take some feedback and maybe integrate it into the internal environment. Maybe we could implement some additional I don't want to say plugins, but different tools. Like maybe you want to see if Responder is running, or just kind of use it to scan for best practices and see if there's any weaknesses that are out there, like low-hanging fruit. So that's pretty much it as far as a tool. All right. So I think that's pretty much it. Unless someone have any questions, we'll be around for a little bit, and yeah. So we'll be around for a little bit. Yeah.
Can we see a copy of the email?
What's that?
Can we see a copy of the email that gets sent?
Yeah. Give me 1 second. Just unplug this. All right.
Is it just a table you sent the usual line?
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty much just a table. It's just
the same table that's in the.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's very simple. The body of the email just says "see attachment," and the attachment has a table. So, I mean, we could make it pretty later on if people want charts and maybe some training and things like that. But right now, this is very basic. We have the tool on our GitHub as well. You can contact us on Twitter. Oh, yep. Sorry about that. It's probably gonna take a second. There we go. So we have our information up here. You can contact us on Twitter if you have any questions. If you if you have some feedback about the tool, we will absolutely love to take the tool and kind of implement a lot of changes with it. Just hoping that we can accomplish helping you all out with administrating your network and detecting changes and weaknesses, and not have to hire a security vendor to come in and tell you some simple things that should already be known. Obviously you want to hire a security vendor for assessments, but like ports, right? So the tool is on GitHub. If you have any questions, you can contact us again on Twitter, or you can submit a pull request if you're into GitHub and all of that. That's pretty much it.
Thank you, everyone.